misty fog crawled across the empty highway, swallowing the road in a thick, suffocating haze. The town of Coldwell had long since been forgotten, erased from maps and memories alike, yet somehow Alex Carter had found himself driving straight into it. His GPS had gone haywire an hour ago, the signal dropping to nothing but static, and every attempt to turn back led him right back onto the same endless stretch of road. He should have seen the warning signs, the decayed road signs covered in deep scratch marks, the distant howls that didn't belong to any known animal, the flickering streetlights that barely illuminated the path ahead. But it was the gas station, the first sign of civilization he had seen in miles, that made him stop. The pumps were rusted, covered in vines, long abandoned. The store's neon open sign flickered erratically, buzzing like a dying insect. Against his better judgment, Alex stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him. The fluorescent lights inside the store flickered violently, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The aisles were filled with expired food, the shelves coated in thick layers of dust, yet the cash register had fresh blood smeared across its surface. Alex's breathing grew shallow as he stepped forward. His boots crunched on shattered glass, and when he looked down, he saw a set of footprints in the dust. Not his own. They led deeper into the store. Then the freezer doors swung open on their own. A wave of putrid, freezing air poured out, carrying the stench of something long dead. Inside, Alex saw frozen bodies, their eyes wide open, their mouths twisted in silent screams. Their flesh was covered in deep bite marks, as if something had gnawed on them before shoving them inside. A whisper slithered through the air. "You're late." Alex spun around. The cashier was standing behind the counter now, except he hadn't been there a second ago. His head twitched at an unnatural angle. His skin stretched too tightly over his skull, his smile too wide, too unnatural. "Need any gas?" he asked, his voice distorted, as if spoken through a radio playing in reverse. Alex stumbled backward, knocking over a display of rotten chips. The walls of the gas station started shifting. The aisles twisted, stretching impossibly long, the shelves curling into grotesque, organic shapes. The rows of drinks in the fridge became rows of unblinking human eyes staring back at him. And then the lights went out. A scraping sound filled the air. Something was moving in the darkness. Something big. The floorboards creaked beneath heavy footsteps, coming closer. Alex couldn't see it, but he could feel it. Something breathing just inches away. The scent of rotting meat filled his nostrils, and a raspy voice whispered right against his ear. Alex didn't need to be told twice. He turned and sprinted down the aisle, but the exit was gone. The door was replaced by a gaping black tunnel, pulsing like a living thing. He had no choice. He ran straight into it. Darkness swallowed him whole. Then, silence. Alex landed hard on the ground, his lungs burning. He was no longer in the gas station. He was somewhere worse. A dim red glow illuminated the vast, endless hallway before him, lined with hundreds of doors, each marked with a single bloody handprint. Behind them, he could hear muffled screams. Some were distant, some were right next to him. And then the knocking started. Boom, boom, boom. Each door shook violently, as if something inside was desperate to get out. A chill crawled up Alex's spine, and then one door slowly creaked open. A hand, not human, not anymore, slid into view. It had too many fingers. It beckoned. It should not have come. Alex turned to run, but the hallway had changed. The doors were gone. There was only one path forward. And at the end of it, standing in the blood-red glow, was a figure that looked exactly like him, except its smile was too wide, and it was holding a knife. The end, or just the beginning? Alex Carter's breath came in short, shallow gasps as he stood frozen in the endless red-lit hallway. The figure at the end, his own doppelganger, twisted and wrong, grinning with a knife in hand, tilted its head in an unnatural motion as if examining him. The hallway walls pulsed like they were alive, breathing in slow, suffocating waves. Then the lights flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, the figure was suddenly closer. Alex stumbled backward, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. It hadn't walked, it hadn't moved, it had just appeared. The knife in its grip dripped with something dark, though there had been no sound, no impact. Another flicker. Closer. Its smile never changed, never wavered, but its eyes, empty, black voids, seemed to stretch wider, drinking in every ounce of fear pulsing through Alex's body. Then everything went black. For a moment there was nothing. No air, no sound, no light. Then came the knocking. Boom, boom, boom. Alex gasped awake, but he wasn't in the hallway anymore. He was in a hospital. The fluorescent lights buzzed dimly overhead, casting an eerie green glow. His body felt like lead, his arms too heavy to move. A distant beeping echoed in the room, a heart monitor. He turned his head, his vision swimming, trying to piece together what was real. A nurse was standing by his bed, writing something on a clipboard. "You're awake," she said without looking at him. Alex tried to speak, but his throat was dry, raw, as if he had been screaming for days. He tried to sit up, but thick leather restraints bound his wrists and ankles to the hospital bed. "What? What happened?" His voice was barely a whisper. The nurse finally turned to face him. It was his mother, but that was impossible. His mother had been dead for 10 years. "You're safe now," she said, her voice soft, wrong. Her lips moved, but the words didn't seem to match. It was like watching a puppet being forced to speak. Alex struggled against the restraints. This wasn't right. None of it was right. "Where am I?" he demanded. The nurse, his mother, only smiled. "You came back," she whispered. Then the lights flickered, and in that brief second of darkness, she was standing right next to his bed. Her cold fingers pressed against his wrist. "You should have stayed gone." Alex thrashed violently, the bed creaking under his weight. His mind reeled. Had he escaped? Was this real? Had it all been a nightmare? Then, the beeping of the heart monitor stopped. A deep, suffocating silence swallowed the room. Alex's breath hitched as he turned toward the machine. It was no longer a heart monitor. It was a screen. And on that screen was a live feed of himself, lying in a hospital bed in a completely empty room. There was no nurse. There were no restraints. It was just him, staring blankly at the ceiling. Alex's pulse thundered in his ears, and then his reflection in the screen turned its head and looked at him. Boom, boom, boom. The knocking again wasn't coming from the door, was coming from inside the screen. The image on the screen glitched, flickering between his real self and something else. Something hollow, grinning, watching. Then, from the corner of the room, a voice slithered through the silence. "It's time to wake up, Alex." A hand, pale and inhumanly long, reached from beneath the hospital bed, its fingers curling around his ankle, and then the floor collapsed beneath him. Darkness. Alex was falling. Not fast. Not like gravity had taken him. It felt like he was being pulled downward, deeper into something that had been waiting for him all along. The air around him was thick, dense, filled with a sickly sweet scent of rotting flowers. His screams didn't echo. There was nothing to bounce off, just endless void swallowing him whole. Then he landed, hard. His body slammed against something soft but wrong, like he had fallen onto a mass of breathing flesh. The ground beneath him shifted, alive, pressing against his hands like something was crawling just beneath its surface. Alex's body screamed in pain, but he forced himself to move. He wasn't in the hospital anymore. He was in a forest, but not like any forest he had ever seen. The trees stretched too high, their bark too smooth, almost fleshy. The sky above was an unmoving black mass, no stars, no clouds, just... And ahead of him, the gas station, the same one from before. But this time it was burning. The neon "Open" sign flickered erratically, sparks flying as flames licked up the walls. The windows were shattered, the inside completely dark, except for a single figure standing just behind the glass. Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was him, but unlike before, it wasn't smiling. It was staring. Wait. And then it raised a hand and pointed at him. Behind Alex, something moved. Slow, deliberate. Heavy footsteps pressed into the soft, living ground. Alex turned and saw them, shadowed figures emerging from between the trees. Tall, featureless, dozens of them. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like something was forcing them to walk. But it wasn't until they started speaking that Alex truly felt his mind snap, because they all had his voice, every single one, speaking in perfect unison. "You don't belong here, Alex." The ground trembled beneath his feet. The gas station burned brighter. The sky split open, and from the chasm above, something crawled out. A hand, impossibly large, its fingers stretching across the sky like roots, reached toward him. The figures began to move faster, closing in. Alex turned to run, but the forest had disappeared. There was only the door, the same rotting wooden door from the gas station, the one with the bloody handprints, the one that had been waiting for him. There was no time to think, no time to question. The figures lunged. Alex threw himself through the door. Silence. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a dim light flickered overhead. Alex's breathing came fast, uneven, his hands shaking as he pulled himself off the floor. The room was small, windowless, and directly in front of him, a mirror. For a moment he didn't move, didn't breathe, because his reflection wasn't copying him. It was smiling, and behind the glass, in the endless void stretching beyond the mirror's surface, something else was watching. Then, slowly, it knocked. Boom, 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 and whispered, "You understood."